Welcome everybody back here at Veil of Sound. I am utterly perplexed that this happens because it's one of my bucket list interviews.
Hey, cool.
Because I'm very, very happy to have Dan Barrett from Have a Nice Life, Giles Corey, Blackwing, and several other projects here on the show that I really, really like. So, Dan, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. That's super nice of you to say, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we are too. First question that we always do. You've already hinted at it in our pre-recording chat. Do you have any kind of band merch, shirt, stuff, vinyl from your own band or somebody else that you would like to plug here right now? And I'll give you a moment to think. I will plug my
Uh,
stuff for today. I'm
oh,
wearing
sick.
Watch.
Watch shirt. That's cool. So do I want to promote anybody's stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we have an online store that people can buy stuff at. That's perfectly fine. The Flenser sells Have a Nice Life stuff that you can find as well. Um, I love Chat Pile. Chat Pile has amazing shirts also on the Flenser. Really just buy stuff from the Flenser because I love the Flenser and I love all the Flenser bands who are just the sweetest people you could ever want to meet. Like just literally down to a person. They're all total sweethearts, the nicest people in the music industry. So you can go check that out for sure.
I would definitely support that one. And if anybody wants to know a little bit more about Chetpal and their last record, go back I think 4 months and you'll find an interview with Raygun here on our channel. And he also, interestingly, at this very moment promoted one of their own shirts. So if you want to find out which one he mentioned, look at the video.
They have
Um,
very cool shirt designs. I think they have like my favorite band shirt designs. They've got a real cool aesthetic. So yeah, go for it.
They do, although I have to say that some of the Kenmo shirts are also mind-blowingly cool.
They're great. Yeah, they're awesome
Yeah.
too. They're super nice. I got to meet them and they're again total sweethearts. This is like the running theme is you meet a band like most of the bands in this, like whatever you call this scene that we're kind of in, they're all very nice. I have yet to meet anybody who's just a total dick. So it's pretty cool.
I think that also is connected to the, I don't want to say ideology, but the idea behind the Flenser. I think it's one of those labels which just simply is very good at picking who they work with, not only from a musical point of view, but also on a personal level.
Yeah, I would agree.
And as we're talking about the Flenser, who is regularly repressing a certain record by your band.
Hmm.
Question: do you know which number of press we are of Deathconsciousness by now?
No, but I also didn't know when I was the one pressing it. So that's not a good, it's not good. My attention to detail is very low. I'm more of a big picture person. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really pay a whole ton of attention. I just like that it's in print. It always surprises me when they print another one.
Yeah.
I just kind of keep expecting it to stop, but it keeps going. So it's awesome.
So I looked it up. We are now at number 19, at round number 19 of presses
Awesome.
of
That's
Death
amazing. That's
Consciousness.
super cool.
Would you ever have thought that when you were recording the songs, when you're writing them?
No, no. Yeah, we did not. I think we actively thought people would hate it. We had an experience where we tried to give away early sort of demo versions of the stuff that became Death Consciousness, and we literally couldn't give it away. I think we tried to give it away at an ISIS show and found most of them just on the ground when we left. Like it just was not, we weren't like, oh yeah, there's gonna be this pent up demand. So it's been very strange. Yeah, it kind of it keeps being rediscovered by a different group of people, and that's really awesome, and it's very fulfilling and it's very gratifying. But it's you can't plan for it, right? Like it's not like if I wanted to do that again, I have any idea how it's done, right? Like I can't recreate the sort of the the systematic sort of cause and effect diagram that sort of led to that. Which kind of makes it more special to me because it's not like there's some big marketing push behind Death Consciousness that like
Yeah.
keeps it in the zeitgeist. It just people keep finding it. They have a relationship to it, and it's awesome. So yeah, it's truly inconceivable from the point of view of the person who was making that record at the time, or the people that were making that record, um, which has been interesting for sure.
I mean, like you have released music since in various alternate different projects. We had two more um, Have a Nice Life records. We had Giles Corey and Blackwing. But
Mhm.
is patience in what you do maybe one of the keys to the success of your music?
Is patience? Maybe. It kind of depends on how you're defining patience. I actually think I'm a bit impatient. Um, like, for example, I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to things, particularly recording,
Mhm.
and I often regret it later.
Mhm.
Like there's a Blackwing song that I now I wish I could go back in time and cut off like the last 10 seconds of it, right? Like I was like it'd be so much better if I could just cut the last 10 seconds. But I thought of that after the album was already out.
Mhm.
So it's like
Yeah.
if I had waited like a couple more months and like sat with it, it probably would have occurred to me. But it's more just that we have always worked at a certain pace. We're slow to produce music. A lot of that's just logistical. A lot of it's our personalities. We both do a lot of things. Tim is a full-time teacher. He's got a farm. He's got like a million animals to take care of. He's in different musical projects. I have a business. I've got a million different things I'm trying to do. I got kids. There's always things that are pulling us in multiple directions. And so over time, I've had to kind of accept that that's the rate that things happen at.
Yeah.
And generally, if I try to speed it up too much, it doesn't work particularly well. So in a way, sure. It's but I think a lot of it is just being okay with um learning. We had this in the beginning, and then it becomes more difficult as people actually care about the stuff that you put out. It becomes more
Mhm.
difficult to maintain this stance, but ultimately we really try to maintain a stance of we do this for the joy it brings us,
Mhm.
and in doing that, that's what will connect with people. But the more we think about it's been a while since we put out a record, or
Mhm.
is this song have a nice life enough for this project, or does it go over here or whatever? Like we just we had a demo we were working on, and we got asked to potentially to add something maybe to this compilation, and I think it's happening, but I don't know, right? So we were like, okay, well, what can we put out that's kind of ready for people to listen to it? And we had this song that is we always refer to it as our like German techno song. Like it's like very different. It's just not, it doesn't really fit what the band is now, right? But we had a ton of fun making it, and
Yeah.
we both really like listening to it. And that's really the spirit of the project. It's
Mhm.
what do we like? So try to maintain that stance as much as possible, and hopefully we have some patience while we're doing it.
So then it's less of the patience idea, but more of the idea of, as you said, is this have a nice life-ish enough song?
I think it becomes this is a thing. It's a thing you get when if you ever read systems theory, you ever get into systems theory, like I always recommend there's this amazing woman, Donella Meadows, who was a systems theorist, did a lot of sort of ecological work. She wrote this incredible book called Thinking in Systems, which is kind of like the primer for systems thinking. It was the first systems theory book I ever read. And I think it's in that book where she says that every system, every like successful system has within it the seeds of its own destruction, right? Like every system that gets going, there's some element of it that if it is allowed to continue will kind of kill the thing that originally made it work in the first place, right? And that's just a natural rise and fall. And so what definitely happens with a project like ours is a lot of the magic or a lot of what makes it fun was specifically that we thought we had no audience. So it didn't matter what we did. It just didn't matter, right? So it frees you from the kind of, you don't have to think of it as a burden, but I'll use that word, like the burden of the audience's expectation, right? And so whenever I find myself now, like we're working on new Have a Nice Life material, like we're always working on it. And the last few songs that I've worked on and liked, I was like, these are very slow, like they're very quiet. And you can get wrapped up in the question of like, well, does that count as a Have a Nice Life song? Does it match the template we've created? But of course, the whole thing was there was no template, and that's what made it good. So you at least for me, you have to deliberately kind of step outside of that a bit. Although I will say, so you mentioned Reagan Bush from Chatpile. You interviewed him. I interviewed him on my podcast. And I kind of asked him about this same thing because their record Cool World had just come out. And I was like, that record's sick, but it's different. And I was like, how much do you care? How much do you think about it? And he said, we kind of do it both ways. Like there's some songs where we're like, where it's just for us. And then he's like, and then let's write a chat pile song. He's like, let's write a song that's like, that's the chat pile song. Like for the people that want that, here's that, right? So you try to balance it. You try not to lose what makes it fun and special. And I really do believe that you have to keep it fresh for yourself. And ultimately that's what people connect to. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But we've been very lucky and we have amazing fans and an incredible audience. So I really got nothing to complain about.
I said, like, I'm very sure that there are a lot of Have a Nice Life fans who are very dedicated and who own all 19 presses. But there is something in what you said that I like a lot. I think for a project to keep its, I don't want to say mystique, because that is aiming so high, but for a project that works at a certain pace, similar to Have a Nice Life, I think a lot of times this change of perspective is also something that you need. But then again, you have a lot of different bands and you have a lot of changing perspectives. How do you know, or how do you differentiate between, okay, this is definitely a Have a Nice Life track and this is just something else?
I mean, that is a really good question. I wish I had a great answer for that. It's more like, so it's varied. There have been times where a project had a very specific idea. So like Giles Corey it started as only acoustic instruments because we had just kind of Deathconsciousness had come out and it was a lot of distortion, a lot of synth. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do something completely different. And then of course, over time I ended up putting synths and stuff on it anyway, but it's like, that was the idea. Right. Mm-hmm. And then Blackwing was similar where it was like, okay, it's all synth. There's no guitar. And so sometimes there's like a real specific idea that I think would be cool. And other times it's more chronological. Sometimes it's like, hey, we just did a Have a Nice Life thing and now we're kind of in a rest period and I'm still writing And so it kind of goes somewhere else. Sometimes so that's kind of what happened originally. Now it's a mix. And I've actually been thinking about this lately because what was happening was I came off of No Moon, which was the last Blackwing record. And we were like, okay, now we played Have a Nice Life shows. We kind of did the live thing for a while, and then it was like, okay, now we have some time off. I'm gonna write for Have a Nice Life. And what I found was I was just writing Blackwing songs all the time. I was just like, I'm kind of I'm doing the same stuff, a lot of the same stuff, right? And like, not just that it's like synthy, but like the exact same song. So I was like, I wrote this song already. Like it's like, there was already that there, and I was kind of stuck in that. So what I'll often do is I'll put some constraint on myself. So I started writing um, again on the guitar. It just so happened that at the same time, Tim, who also writes and is sending me stuff, he was also kind of working it in digital. Uh, the way we've always worked historically is like I've had Logic and I'm kind of producing, and we're both playing instruments, but I'm kind of the one in the computer. Um, and so Tim, over time, has gotten more into that and has kind of done more of his own production and was working in 8-track tape for his Flowers of St. Francis stuff and getting into sequencing and synths and all this stuff. So he was sending me a lot of electronic stuff, and I was doing a lot of electronic stuff, and I was like, there's just too much electronic stuff. So I'm going to write on the acoustic guitar, which is kind of how I was originally writing a lot of my songs. So I've kind of forced myself there. But then I find that I'm playing acoustic guitar. There tends to be a certain tempo to that if I'm just playing around the house or whatever. And it kind of feels more like a Giles Corey thing. And so then I'm like, well, okay, is this more Giles Corey music? But then I'm like, well, okay, but when we were first doing Have a Nice Life, Giles Corey didn't exist. And all the songs that would have been Giles Corey just went into Have a Nice Life. Right.
Yeah.
Or like, so it's almost this thing where you can think yourself into a box and you can think yourself in circles, and ultimately it doesn't matter. So at this point, I am just kind of doing whatever. I'm just recording. I don't really think about the project. I know Tim and I are working on Have a Nice Life material. That's our main thing. But when I sit down to record, I'm just going to record. I'm going to see what comes up. Some stuff Tim will love, and then we'll work on that. Some of it he won't, and then some of that will go in the garbage, and then some of it will be like, okay, well, this is just for me. I'll work on this later. And so it's we try to make it be as naturalistic as possible, which can be hard, but it's ultimately there's no other real way to do it, right? Otherwise, I think the projects tend to be stereotype. They stereotype themselves. They just become echoes of it, right? So I always say, like, if I'm going to do another Giles Corey record, it's going to be like like a grind record or so. It's got to be something like completely on the other end of the spectrum, so we'll see how it goes.
It's interesting that you refer to Giles Corey as an example quite often, because I mean, like, we have to remember that basically Giles Corey, the records, and also Hinterkaifeck, I mean, like, those are records for which you got a certain kind of concept behind it. So is that also maybe a moment that you come up with a whole concept to certain records, EPs, whatever, and then you fill the concept with music?
Yeah, I will. We've never really written it fully concept first, but a lot of times I will have a kind of concept for, oh, if we were going to put this out, we're going to do something cool. What would it be? How would I kind of tie it in? Like, I've always really liked the world building aspect of Have a Nice Life, right? Like I liked that when Coheed and Cambria was doing it. I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like, it's just an excuse for me to be like, okay, like, and I like writing, and I like that whole process of what can I add in here, and how does it play back and forth. So it's never been so direct where it's like, well, here's the story, let's write songs for it. I don't find that I personally can write that way. When I'm writing, I'm almost always just screwing around, playing, trying to make something that sounds cool, and then I'll hear something that I like and be like, okay, let me build on that. I'll build on that now. Let me see if I can build a song structure around it. So I'm not a good enough songwriter to start with the concept, and you know what I
Mhm.
mean? I feel like Chat Pile, not to glaze Chat Pile nonstop in this interview, but it's like I've been listening to them a lot because my kids got into Chat Pile, so they listen to Chat Pile a lot. So it's like we listen to it a lot, and I think about their music a lot because it's on. And I always feel like their songs are very cinematic, and they feel like there's like a scene happening.
Mhm.
And I feel like our music is a little bit more ambiguous. It's a little more about a feeling of a thing rather than me sitting down and being like, this song's about a sailor who just got divorced or something, which is like,
Yeah.
Chapel always feels like this is about this guy. There's a
Yeah.
guy that's this song is about, right? Um, so yeah, so they kind of intermarry and go back and forth, but the music almost always comes first, I think. Yeah.
Would you say that maybe a part of the mystique of Have a Nice Life is exactly that you are not screaming into people's faces, okay, this is our song. But a lot of the mystique is that people listen to your song, they include themselves in it, and therefore it's always a little give and take. It's a little you give something and they project into it, and then you have a whole new thing.
Yeah, I yes, I think so. I think there's a certain amount of like I don't write to be vague. I'm not trying to be vague, but there's a certain amount of vagueness that allows people to project onto it,
Yeah.
right? And to hear themselves in something, even if I'm talking about something very specific to me, the sort of poetic, not that it's poetic, but like the sort of poetic language that we use allows a certain amount of projection. I can't remember who wrote this or where I read it or whatever, but I remember reading about how music is sort of unique in that it allows people to experience an unmediated emotion without having to sort of translate the work first, right? Like if you read a novel, there's a certain amount
Mm-hmm.
of translation into like, what
Yeah.
does this mean? And then how does that make me feel, right? You look at the painting, what's this trying to express to me? Music is kind of like it goes almost directly to the emotional piece. Very few people are sitting there like analyzing the music, right? But you sort of feel what the music is trying to get across.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the same thing we do when it came time to translate the recording into the live performance, which is very different from the recording for a lot of different reasons. But the thing that we always said was, is, okay, it's going to be different, but it's got to feel like listening to the recording. But it's not going to be the recording. It's going to be totally different, but you want it to feel like the way you remember it, right? A part hits a certain way on the recording. We want to recreate that sensation live. You just got to do it very differently. And so it's the same thing. You're trying to get at a feeling and you're trying to give the person a feeling and they can think about it after, right? They can put it together after. They can try to
Mm-hmm.
explain what it is. Um, and they'll never really know like I don't go out of my way to be like, this is what it's about. Because I think that robs it of people. And it's a little bit like revealing the secret to the magic trick. It's like, oh, that sucks. It's like, yeah, I was
Yeah.
super hungry and I tried to buy a sandwich and my card got declined. And they're like, that's what it's fucking about? That ruins it. I'm like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not going to tell you what it's about anymore. You know what I mean? Like anyway, so it's not really about a sandwich, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's not about a sandwich. It's about a steak. I know what you mean. Um, Something that also strikes me when listening to nearly whichever project, maybe with the exception of Blackwing, but with a lot of your projects, I always feel as if, okay, this can only come from New England. I don't know why, but do you think that there is a certain New England element to your music?
I think so. Yeah, I often feel like it. I can't remember. Someone messaged me the other day about how we mentioned Connecticut a lot, which is where I'm from. And Tim's from Massachusetts, which is very close to Connecticut. So, yeah, I mean, I often feel that way. I feel pretty New England in my sensibilities.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if I could parse out exactly what I even mean by that.
Mhm.
But there is certainly a certain kind of aesthetic there that, yeah, it's like it doesn't. I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother, she was teaching on a Zuni Native American reservation, which was out in New Mexico. So we drove out there. It was the first time I'd ever been out there. We drove out there to visit her, and I still remember like the landscape of Arizona and New Mexico and how really strange it felt and how alien it felt. And you realize, like, just growing up in a place like New England where there's never an unbroken skyline. There's always trees, there's always something in front of you, right? There's never a super long expanse except if you go to the ocean or something, right? So it just
Yeah.
these little things kind of work their way into your sensibility in a way that I don't think I'll ever really get. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know how you avoid it. I've been here most of my life, and it gets in there sooner or later.
Mhm. I can see that. And I mean, like, of course, there are obvious connections. I mean, like Giles Corey himself, of course, there are certain things. Um, there is also something in me that is asking the question, like, I mean, like, we got Giles Corey, we got Hinterkaifeck. So, I mean, like, some kind of darkness in the origins or roots. Is that also maybe something that you took from where you're from, this darkness affinity in a way?
I think so. I mean, so New England's the only part of America with any history per se, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
not
more or
literally
less.
true,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but sort of visible history.
Mhm.
And of course, there's so much history that predates, the European colonization of America that just isn't around anymore to be seen. So, I'm not implying that's not there. It's more just that New England's really the only place you can look around and see a building that's 100 years old, right? And in Europe and other places in the world, that's like completely taken for granted. In the United States, none of that stuff is particularly up well. I mean, that's not necessarily true, but Americans as a culture aren't great about historical preservation, I don't think. Um, so there's a certain kind of um, past awareness
Mhm.
that I think is a big part of our sensibility. Both Tim and I were history majors in college, so that's kind of how that's not how we met, but a lot of our earliest stuff we it's literally just we're taking from stuff we're reading in class, like the shirt that with the no fun not ever shirt that we made. The picture is from a textbook that Tim was reading about like Danish, like capitalism and early Denmark or something, right? Like we were kind of steeped in that. And I think there's a certain kind of awareness of kind of cyclical rise and fall that happens because of that. And I'm sure it works in our way into um, our awareness. I think it's depending on where you're at, it's easy to believe that history is kind of like a straight line up and to the right where everything's getting better. And I think
Mhm.
it is largely true that things are mostly better for the vast majority of people. If you had to choose whether you're going to be poor today or poor 1,000 years ago, you're probably going to pick today because 1,000 years
Even a
ago.
hundred years ago.
Right. You're probably going to do that, right? So there's certainly something there, but there's also something very much to the idea that history is more a cycle, and that entails a certain amount of rising up and falling down. And I don't know, that does something to you. I mean, it could also just be that, like, hey, we were melancholic kids, and that's what we were drawn to. It's there in our kind of
Yeah.
personalities, but um, I think there is something to the New England aesthetic that kind of folds in the kind of like falling apartness of a lot of the surroundings around here. You know, not to overstate things, because of course there's a Starbucks like 30 seconds from my office. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I'm living in like dilapidated, ramshackle houses or something. But
yeah, I know what you mean. But there is one thing that a lot of people should also understand. I totally agree with, history in a way being a cycle. Not necessarily the events, but there are similarities. And there is one thing that a lot of people forget. History and the present live in the same moment. If you look at the pyramids of Gizeh and you only change your perspective a little bit, you will see that right next to the pyramids, like 150 meters away, there is a huge street, huge infrastructure, and there is fast food.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's why I totally agree. But then the question is, at the moment, would you see American society rising again, or is it falling again?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think I used to have a clearer feeling about things. And the last few years, I mean, this is just me personally, I think I've become more uncertain about most things, mostly because
we got alternative facts.
Yeah, it's the ecosystem as such. I was just having a conversation with my friend about this, is so wired. And I'm not even talking about like there's an evil group of people that are out to manipulate you. It's just that like we're the first people to live in a media environment where the media environment adapts itself to your tendencies.
Yeah.
And it is truly bizarre. Like the more it's like, reading the newspaper never changed what was in the newspaper depending on what you read. Well, now that happens. Yes. Right? And it's becoming more and more intense. And so I've kind of like, I have kind of like, I used to be very enraged by things. And now I'm just kind of like, well, I don't quite even know what to think. And I've sort of set a sort of rule for myself where, I'm like, if you didn't spend like 50 hours making a thing, I'm not going to consume it. So I'm really trying to like read books, things like that. But I am reading, speaking of, and I'm trying to read kind of different people. So like right now I'm reading the book Sexual Personae by Camille Paglia. She's like really famous sort of feminist critic, but she's this weird figure where she's like a feminist critic, but she's kind of considered right wing, but everybody hates her no matter who you talk to. The right wing hates her, left wing hates her. She doesn't fit anywhere. And she's real sassy. And she doesn't mind just calling everybody a piece of, POS, or call them an asshole or whatever. So, but she Sexual Personae was like her first book. It was what she wrote for her thesis, essentially her thesis work. It took her forever to get it published. And, regardless of whether you agree with her, she's doing a lot of analysis of Greek culture and, its effect on modern day culture, whatever. So regardless of whether you buy her thesis, she's one of these writers where every other line is an absolute banger. Like I keep underlining things, but like song title, song title, song title. Like she's just dropping bar after. I mean, it's every paragraph. It's really wild to watch. Like it's not to compare her to like Nietzsche, but Nietzsche's kind of like that. He's just like, I know this is a mic drop moment. I've had 7 mic drop moments in this paragraph. I'm just going to keep putting them in there. Really good at that. So anyway, the whole reason I brought her up was, she talks about specifically there's a give and take between Apollo and Dionysus. There's the kind of like the sort of the forward momentum, sharp angular lines, logic and reason sort of rising up. And then ultimately that becomes sort of disintegrated and destroyed by the Dionysian, which is sort of like the weird swamp nature of humanity. And it's earthy. She talks about earth cult versus sky cult and all those things. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a lot of different ways to think about it. I think that I I'll tell you this is how I'm decided to deal with this. Um, I really, really, really just wanted to be in a community of people who cared about ideas and were willing to be serious about ideas, willing to do
Yeah.
work in order to engage with ideas, right? Like I don't,
Yeah.
I'm willing to engage with anybody as long as you're serious. Well, almost nobody's serious. Like nobody really believes anything. They're just kind of like, how do I make you feel like crap? And that's the game. So
Yeah.
I started like a little community where I was like, every single week we're going to talk about a book. We're going to talk about this. We're going to post your work, post your art, post your whatever. Like just be serious about something. And that's more or less what I would encourage people to do. It's like if you want to change things, you really have to change it starting with the people around you, with your
Yeah.
immediate group. You have to make that change felt with the people you actually have contact with. And, not to downplay political engagement, because I think it's super important. I had on my podcast, I had a former Comptroller of the United States, Comptroller General of the United States, David Walker. He had um, cabinet assignments under Reagan, under the first Bush, and under Bill Clinton. Right, so the dude has like been in government like basically his whole adult life,
Yeah.
and he said it. He's like, it's just the urge to politically engage is not the same in the younger generation as it used to be, and so what that leaves is a certain kind of person doing politics all the time,
Yeah.
right? And so if anybody's bummed out about that, the way to work on that is to be political in your group. Like what can you do with the people immediately around you,
Yeah.
make your community better, that kind of thing. Anyway, that was a long rambling answer.
No, that is okay. Would you agree that a person who wants to be political should start in his community and then, while trying to change everybody's life for the better in this community, maybe at one point think, okay, it worked in this community. Am I willing to take it a step further?
I think people should just, so no matter what, everybody should be doing something in their immediate community, right? And it can be very small, right?
Yeah.
I like teaching. I do a weekly lecture series. I make it pay whatever you want. Most people pay zero. This is my way of engaging with people and just being like, here's what I've learned. Take it, do your own thing with it.
Yeah.
And that's what
and
I do.
It's your way of giving something back.
Exactly. Right. And it's fun. I mean, I mostly do it because it's fun, but it also is pro-social, which I like, right? But I also just think that particularly people who haven't yet started a career or who are considering it, you should consider getting into politics, like local politics, local government. Like politics, it has a certain connotation. Local government, right? These things are incredibly important. And we kind of get trained to believe that the only thing that matters is presidential politics or congressional politics or whatever. But simply is not the case.
Exactly.
So,
that is also something that I found out a few days ago when reading another survey here in Germany. A lot of people, I think the last number that I had was around 40% of the people are unhappy with the German government, which, no matter which political party you are in, it is understandable.
right.
And at the same time, and that is something that I myself found very encouraging, more than 2/3 of people say over the last few years, they have become more content with their local government body in their community, in their county, in their city. And that is something where I said, okay, that is a good way to start. And I think that's the same in the States. It's also easier, of course. I mean, we have to agree on the thing, affecting people's lives is quicker on a community basis. That's just the thing.
It's more tied to reality.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think you actually find that people have less disagreements when you talk about when you keep it to here's a policy and what I think will happen when we have the policy and let's talk about it's what tends to drive people crazy is essentially an endless game of point scoring where it's like, how can I dunk on the other person as much as possible? And if it's
You
like,
have
well,
to be
okay,
7 feet 10, and then you can dunk on any person.
well, there you go, right? And I'm not. Just in case I know I'm sitting down, but I'm not, right? So, but if you get into a conversation
I've,
that's
I've
like,
seen
well,
you on stage. You're not 7 feet.
no, that's true, very not. But if you get into a conversation that's like, well, if we raise the capital gains tax, what will that do? That's a very different kind of conversation with a very different emotional tone,
Exactly.
for sure.
And there, I think on that level, the emotion kicks very, very quickly because of the divide that has been created by what you have mentioned, our media outlets. Not only the TV and radio stations, but also, of course, our social media outlets, which build this divide. But we don't want to turn into a sociology or politics podcast. I would like to come back to you and your music.
Sure.
At the moment, would you say that the bigger focus at the moment is Have a Nice Life?
Yeah, for sure. So, I had released Black Wing. We played a year or two of shows, which we don't play a lot of shows. So there's typically we'll do a run in the summer, and we'll typically start practicing for that in the winter. Um, so that takes a fair amount of time. And then when our last thing ended, it was like, okay, the last run ended. Um, I was like, all right, now I have time. I'm not practicing to work on music more deliberately. Because I'm just at the point in my life where schedule wise, if I don't make time, it used to be that I could just work on music whenever I felt like it. Now I really have to make specific time to work on it or it won't happen. So, I started scheduling time every week to work on music. And, I think we've had the idea for a while. Okay, we're going to work on the next Have a Nice Life thing. Tim is actually super prolific. So he's been like producing like, you know, riff after riff after riff. He's got like a just giant folder of stuff. And so we're kind of in the phase where it's like, all right, well, let's go through all this stuff. Let's sort out what feels like something we can work on, what feels like something we can't. We're just sort of feeling out where we're at now. But in terms of songwriting and what we like and what naturally comes out. But yeah, I think of it as working on the next Have a Nice Life record. And I have kind of a vague idea of um, not what it'll end up being, but kind of some things that I would like to do with it. But it's all pretty early. I have some demos that I'm really happy with. And then, as it always happens, I have a bunch of demos that I think are just the worst thing that anybody's ever made. And you just bury those in the backyard and you keep the good ones and you just keep at it until you feel like you have a record. So that's the phase that we're in right now. But we'll get ready. I mean, we're coming to Europe this year. We're coming to Europe for the first time. Well, we were at Roburn in the Netherlands, but doing more of an actual European sprint. And so we'll start practicing again soon. But for now, that's what we're working on.
That's maybe the best news that I've heard in
Mhm.
2025 up to now. Um,
Cool.
really. Um, I mean, I'm not gonna ask where things are going and when things are gonna come out because that's just stupid. But um, when preparing your tour, I mean, of course, you are developing a set list. And you've already mentioned the time and effort it needs to get the set list and to get everything ready. Um, do you also take time and maybe incorporate a new idea into a set, or do you say like, let's stick to the old ones?
It depends. It depends a little bit on what we're getting ready for
Mm.
and what the constraints are going to be. So like how long. So this last tour that we did, so last year, we were headlining and we were playing bigger venues. And so our set was like an hour and a half. Just
Mhm.
an absolutely insane amount of, I mean, for us, like just an insane amount of time. So it's like, all right, well, what do we want to play? But then we'd also done several years in a row, and we were like, I'm tired of playing X, I'm tired of playing Y. So what we'll typically do is we'll build the set around some core songs that we know we're going to play that are kind of the standards, for lack of a better word. And then we're going to bring in stuff that's a little unexpected, we've never played before. So like last year, we closed with Sisyphus instead of Earth Mover. That was like first time we'd ever played Earth Mover or ever played Sisyphus live. I think it was the first year we didn't play Earth Mover, right? We didn't have it in the set. And so what does that do to the set? How does it change it? What do we want to include? What do we want to not? There are people now who've seen us multiple times. What do we want to change, if anything, right? Like, what do we want to start with? So, or like last year, we put a quick one into the set list, whereas before we weren't really ever playing that. So it's just we try to change it up and keep it fresh. We usually are like, what's one thing we haven't played yet that we can pull out of the vault and kind of work in? But for example, this next tour, we're we're doing Europe, so we're doing a place we've never been before. We're playing a bunch of fest sets where not all festival sets, but we're playing some festival sets that are, going to be 30 minutes, 45 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
So obviously we can't, that's like 3 Have a Nice Life songs. So it's like, all right, you got to really pick your poison. You'd be like, okay, maybe this is the only time this person's going to see us live. What do we got to play in order to make sure that person has a good time? And for me, like, that's what I care about. Like, the writing the songs is totally for me. And I love playing, so I don't mind whatever we do. But for performance, I'm like, this person paid to come and see us. We're gonna do something that's really, really awesome. It's gonna give that person a great experience. And it's worked out pretty well so far. So it's been a lot of fun.
Where I was headed more into the direction of, do you test new songs live?
Oh, no, we really haven't. I mean, I think some of the Sea of Worry stuff we might have played live before we put it on recording. That's what you mean, right? So sort of like,
Yeah.
hey, this is a new one. Yeah. It's more like because the way that we write is so iterative that a lot of times, like, a song's not done until it's like, we don't know what the whole song is until it's like all the way done. And then it's like, that's time to put it out. So no, we haven't really done that. We're not against it. It's just the way that we perform and record it hasn't quite worked out that way. But when we were doing Sea of Worry, a bunch of those songs were basically, we had really, really rough demos, and then the band fleshed it out and sort of were co-writers on the first half of that record. And so some of those I think probably got played live before they were recorded. But other than that, no, not really.
It is very interesting because, I also thought about when you said like festival sets. On a festival, of course, I would also rather play stuff that people then also afterwards can go back to and re-listen and re-experience. It is interesting also in a way that we are hinting at have a nice life stuff. My goodness, it's already late here in Europe. But what about the other projects that you are in? Will we ever get a new Giles Corey? Will we get a new Blackwing? Or unable to tell?
I mean, it's always unable to tell. I'm at the point in my life where I think it will probably be a thing where every time I put something new out, I will then ask, like, well, was that it? Like, am I done? Am I done now? You know what I mean? Like, how old can I be and still do this? Okay. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's got to be fun for me. And I will always make music if it's fun for me. But I don't have to put it out. And if I think it sucks, I just won't put it out. So it's like, but I don't have any plans to stop recording necessarily. I think Giles is the one that I am the most split on. It's like, is this a band that puts out multiple records, or is it more like this stuff is all one thing, and that's that thing, and now I'm going to do something else, right? Like I'm the least clear on that. Like I was joking, like the next Giles Corey record will be a grind record or something. Like I don't know what the through line is if it's always going to be like that. I have really wanted. We did a we only ever released. I mean, put on the internet demos of this our project called Gate, which was like a really like just lo-fi, badly recorded punk rock band. And I secretly am like, I want to do that like more than anything. Like that's the one that sounds the most fun. Like I'm like, I really just want to be, like in a punk band. And so I keep threatening Tim to be like, let's just do it, let's bring it back. And he's like, well, maybe. So it's always got to be what feels right. And I don't want to force it. I certainly don't want to overstay my welcome. And I don't want to do it simply because people want me to do it. Right. So it'll be a thing where I just feel it out. But I, there's still no feeling better to me than the feeling of working on a song, working on a song, working on a song, and then you finally listen back to it and it hits you as something that's good. That is like my favorite feeling in the world. And it's hard to get it any other way. So, I'll keep trying to get that feeling as long as it makes sense.
Last question before we come to the infamous quickfire round at the end. Is that also a little bit like searching for the same effect again? Like I've already had that, let's say like 22 times in my life. I needed a 23rd time.
A little bit. I think I love making things. I love building things. Even in my, like this is an office. I'm not in like a cool music dungeon or something. Like even in my work, my work is something I made, right? So I get a lot of the same feeling from that. And from the blog and from, there's a lot of ways for me to get that feeling. I think I'm always going to chase that feeling. I always want that. That's just what I like. If I'm not doing that, I don't feel good. The question is, do I have something interesting enough to say with music specifically that becomes the channel that happens in? And I'm not a good musician. Like I don't have a wide range of musical skills. I have like a very narrow range of musical skills. I know this. Like Tim went to music school. I don't know anything about music. I just show up and I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And like, that sounds okay. So, there will come a point at which I just kind of feel like I've probably done all the iterations of this thing I can do.
Yeah.
And that'll be okay. And then I'll do something. I'll become a mime or something, right? It'll be something. I'll find something different.
I already see you entering Hollywood, becoming a mime.
Yeah, look, I'm the skin color is not that different from the white, face paint. You know what I mean? It'll be not a whole lot necessary.
So, first of all, thanks into all the insight into the way you make music and all the other things. But nobody leaves a Veil of Sound interview without having to go through the infamous quickfire round at the end, where you will get different couples like AC versus DC, Bon Jovi, or Ellen DeGeneres, because at the moment I think they both look the same. Okay. And you have to choose. And we'll start off with something that I took from one of the earlier albums, and especially from one of the singles before The Unnatural World, because on there it said, Dan and Tim reunited by fate. I'm very sure that is a nod to Rival Schools. And then the question is, Rival Schools versus Quicksand. Which Schreifeld's band do you like more?
I mean, I think so. Man, my friend Val will get in like a fight with me about this. I think Quicksand's obviously the more influential band, but I like Rival Schools more. Like I love that Rival Schools record. My wife had a Rival Schools tote bag that I remember thinking was super cool back when we weren't yet dating. I was like, look at that. So I love Rival Schools, man. That is an underrated band, I think. And Quicksand's amazing, but I've listened to way more Rival Schools than I have Quicksand.
Would you also take Rival Schools over Gorilla Biscuits?
That's funny. Yeah, I would. I mean, yeah, Grill Biscuits, amazing. But if you were like, you can throw on one or the other in the car, I would pick Rival Schools for sure.
There is always a certain level of, as I've said, like it sounds very New Englandish, but there is also a certain level of Americana, especially in Giles Corey, and it made me think of good, in a way, good listenable country stuff. And I came up with two of the old icons: Merle Haggard versus Johnny Cash.
Oh my God, that sucks.
I never said it would be easy.
Every time you say this, I'm imagining, I mean, I know, they're dead, but it's like, I'm imagining like there's a gun to each of their heads and you got to choose, right? It's like, fuck, dude. I mean, God. Damn, what do I think? My first thought was Merle Haggard. That was my first instinctual thought. I love Merle Haggard. Johnny Cash is incredible. I probably listened to more Johnny Cash than I have Merle Haggard. But there's something about Merle Haggard that is like just blows me away. So he's probably like my personal taste a little bit more. And obviously there's like there's the little more like kind of I don't want to know what you would call it, kind of like a show business style Johnny Cash stuff that I'm not super into. So I guess I would choose Merle Haggard. He's a real badass, man. I mean, they all are. That whole generation, and particularly Giles Corey was like, I was like, I want to rip off Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, like, I'm trying, Willie Nelson, like I'm trying to rip them off. I just can't do it very well, and so it comes out like that. You know what I mean? But it's I was straight up ripping on those dudes. I thought they were amazing. So yeah, I'll go with Merle. But that was a tough one. That was a real tough one.
I tried to come up with bands that, in my little twisted mind, are somewhat connected with what I think is the basis of Have a Nice Life. And I came up with two bands that were active in the 80s and 90s, especially. And so I'll give you Cocteau Twins versus Codeine.
Interesting.
Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. I don't know.
I mean, I kind of get where you're picking. I'm picking up what you're putting down. You know what I mean? Like I can kind of see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But the obvious one is probably Cocteau Twins, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say Cocteau Twins. I think I appreciate Codeine more than I listen to them. You know what I mean? I mean, that's an incredible band. I don't listen to like a metric ton of Cocteau Twins either.
Yeah,
but there's such an interesting. Yeah, I'll go Cocteau Twins. I mean, that's the kind of what was my original thing. I'm more likely. I'm basing this largely off of if I'm throwing something on, what am I more likely to put on? I think it's probably going to be Cocteau Twins. Yeah.
I don't know why, but I came up with the idea of giving you two American literature icons who are not going to kill us. One of them is the other one still alive? I think one of them is still alive. John Irving versus Ernest Hemingway.
John Irving. Okay. All right. Well, I neither of these are like particularly deep in my. I love reading this. I will say though, I read a couple years ago. I read a biography of Hemingway, and I find Hemingway really interesting. Both of these people, I think, I find more interesting than I enjoy per se. So I'll go Hemingway. Reading the biography of Hemingway was an interesting experience because you know how it ends, and the whole book, it's like. You could kind of feel it coming, and it's this impending thing, and it was real ominous. So it put him in an interest. He's more recent in my brain, so we'll say Hemingway. But
it sounds a bit like reading this biography sounds a little bit like watching Titanic. You know how it's gonna end.
Yeah, you're just like, Yeah,
The
and
ship
then,
has to go down, right? Yeah,
there's all the foreshadowing and stuff, and the
yeah.
kid, Chekhov's like, look at that gun on the wall, that's cool, and you're like, oh, all right, let's see what happens. So yeah, we'll say Hemingway. He's a photogenic young man, so we'll give it to him. But that's an
Well, I
interesting
would
one.
say you
I'll
could
have
say
to.
the same thing about Irving, right? I mean, like the
Yeah, I was gonna
wrestler.
say like that's maybe I should revisit John Irving. I haven't thought about him in a long time.
Mhm.
So I'll add that to my list, the ever-growing list of books I'm supposed to get into. So we'll check that out.
And I always also like to get something from the interviews. And this time you gave me a band which I was very much into some 20 years ago,
Okay.
Coheed and Cambria. And I'll give you two of their albums to choose from. In
Okay.
Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth or Second Wind Turbine Blade. I
All
hope I got
right.
it
So
right.
hold on. I'm gonna look up.
The
I
first
need
one
to look up.
released is Second Wind Turbine Blade.
Oh yeah. So yeah, second stage turbine blade, right? Okay.
Second
So
stage.
and then
And then
the
it's In
other one
Keeping Secrets.
was
In
in
Keeping
keeping.
Secrets, the next one.
Yeah. I am gonna go. I'm gonna go second stage turbine blade. That was the first one I got into. That was the one I really enjoyed. I mean, I like their music generally. Um, Although I wouldn't say I'm like a super deep Coheed
Mhm.
person. Like I haven't really kept up with them. But I remember when that record came out, and I think I was in pieces at the time. And so we're sort of in that melodic hardcore space playing with bands like that. And I remember just being like, well, that doesn't sound like any other band right now. You know what I mean? Like they really did something very
Yeah,
original. And I'm not
definitely.
100% sure that all of it holds up, but some of those like very epic feeling, cinematic feeling moments on that
Yeah,
record are so great.
yeah,
Like I gotta give it to that one. And I always liked the art, and I thought
yeah.
they were cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also one of those bands that a lot of people like. And just like you, I also wouldn't go down that rabbit hole too much because you can get lost in that world. I mean, like what you've mentioned, like this world building idea behind it. I know there are several podcasts by now who are looking at all the different items that they produce, all the little tiny tidbits. And oh, there is another little hint. And my goodness,
Right.
that is,
And there's like a comic book, and I appreciate the scale of it. Like
yeah,
I love that.
yeah,
It's I think the overall vibe isn't really my thing, but it's like I think it's cool, man. And we really need bands to do more weird shit. Like we need weird. The weirder the band, the better. Like please, like I want the band to be like for every record you buy, I make a diorama and I send you like a diorama or something. Do something weird.
yeah,
It's cool,
yeah,
like do it.
yeah. Dan, thanks for all your time. I hope you will feel a little better. I've seen you've already taken off your feel good sweater,
Oh,
so
I
I
got
hope
I
that
got
means
heated
something
up
good.
during this. This was great. Yeah.
So thanks for all your time. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a nice life.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. And I hope you wear the veil of sound on your
On our
face.
little website. So, Dan,
Thanks, man.
I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys on European stages. Take care. Bye bye.
Oh, I love it, man. Yeah, talk to you soon.
Bye bye.